Please remain seated. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Liberty and justice for all. Have you ever wondered why the word equality is not in the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, I wondered that, and when I did a little bit of research, what I found was that actually in the first draft it was in the Pledge of Allegiance, but the supervisors of the person that wrote the pledge took it out because they didn't want to cause any consternation on the part of women and minorities. So today we have liberty and justice for all. And so if we think now in the year 2014, what does that look like? And what does it look like particularly in our leadership roles throughout this country? Well, we know a number of things. We know, number one, that of the Fortune 1000 firms, only 4.6% of CEOs are women. And we know, secondly, that of the top wage earners in this country, only 8.1% are women. We know that in executive level positions, only 14% are women. So we have a challenge. And we know some other things also. We know that in our legislature, in our national legislature, which really is the keeper of our liberty and justice, that only 20% of women serve in the Senate and only 17% of women serve in the House of Representatives. So we have some challenges. And if you happen to think that, well, gosh, however difficult it is here in this country, surely it's better here than it is anywhere else in the world. Well, that's not quite true either, because if you look at the board chairs all across the world and the number of women, what you will find is that the United States actually ranks 14th in that list, and we are behind Canada, we are behind Brazil, and we are behind Mexico. So we know that we have a challenge, and we know that we have some gaps to fill. So how do we go about doing this, and where are we today in this effort as we try to see more women in executive roles? Well, we know some things. We know, number one, that in our educational institutions, from the time a person enters kindergarten until they go to grad school or wherever they end up, we know that girls and young women are gently guided into the softer disciplines. And we know conversely that boys and young men are gently guided into what we term the harder disciplines. They more often are guided into science, technology, engineering, math, and finance. And most of the time, it is those career fields from which leaders are chosen. So we know that. And if we look at our culture, we understand some things now really better than we ever have before. We understand that the very heart of femininity is about giving, it's about nurturing, and it's about support. And young girls and young women, from the time they are 2 years old, come to understand that that is expected of them. And conversely, when we think about masculinity, masculinity more often is defined as rugged individualism, protecting one's family, providing for one's family. So we understand this about our culture. Now that doesn't mean that some women don't have masculine traits and vice versa. But on the whole, this is what our culture teaches us. And we know some other things. We know that in our workplaces today, that there are both formal and informal work processes, policies, and procedures. And actually, in the formal systems, we have done a pretty good job of making those gender neutral. And you can see that in many workplaces today. But in another arena, we have not done such a good job, and this is in the informal systems. And what we know now is that in executive level positions, often those informal systems are the ones that allow people to advance into those roles. And we know some other things also. We know that women, on the average, tend to believe that good work alone will get them into a C-suite or get them into a leadership role, when in fact it takes more than excellent work. It also takes relationships. And if women have not done as good a job as men in developing those long-term business relationships, literally from the time they began their career, then by the time they get to a senior leadership role, it's going to be too late. They're going to look around and they're going to find themselves isolated. And if you look at some of the case studies of some of our earliest, and at least for a period of time, most successful women CEOs, what you will find is that regretfully, sometimes those women ended up losing their jobs because they did not have a network. They did not have the relationships that they should have been building from the very beginning of their career. So we know that. And we know a fourth thing now, and this is one that I think women struggle with, and it is maybe a final frontier, and that is that in our homes, with our spouses, with our partners, with our loved ones, it is critically important that women demand that they be an equal partner in that relationship. And that can be very difficult to do. I know with my own husband, we reached a point one day when I went home and I said, I've been offered a job as a vice president, but it's in Austin, Texas. And he looked at me and he said, Connie, he said, you are so fortunate. We don't have to do this. I can afford to support you, and you can do anything in the world that you want to do. And I looked at him and I said, Larry, you are so fortunate. I can afford to let you do anything that you want to do with your life. And it's funny now, but it was very serious. And at that moment, and we were 13 years into our marriage, we realized that we didn't know each other nearly as well as we thought we did. So, final frontier. So if we look at these things and we recognize what the gap is, and we understand really from a holistic standpoint, what all the dimensions are that cause this, is there anything going on out there in the world that is helping this? And the great news is that there is. Number one, there has been gender-neutral training that has been developed so that if teachers and counselors are put through this type of training, that they actually can reverse the trends that we've seen about guiding young boys and men this direction and young women this direction, and that's wonderful. Second, there are leadership institutes out there that have had some wonderful results in helping women develop leadership skills and relationship skills that will take them into the highest levels of corporations today. And third, there are actually some private institutions, colleges, that do a great job in this arena. So there certainly is hope for this, and we have some methods that are available to us. So when we look at all this, and we look at where we've been for the last 40 years, what else needs to happen? I mean, we've identified the problem. We know why. There's resources out there. Why are the numbers still what they are today? And what can we do about it? Well, I think there are two things. I think, number one, that as women, we need to step up. I think that it is our time. I think we have had 40 years of affirmative action, inclusion, diversity training, diversity councils, and I think it is time for us to step up. And I think one of the ways that we do this is we begin to actively support other women. It is critically important that we take an active role in this and that we reach out. And women who are in leadership positions have a particular responsibility for this. That's one. Second, I think it's time that we begin to hold men accountable and responsible for changing those numbers. And I think from men, what we need to see is intentional leadership. You know, as a business person, if I were trying to get something to be a goal of 50%, and after 40 years I'd only achieved 4% of that goal, I'm pretty sure I would have been fired. So, you know, it is time. It is time for action. It is time to begin to take some hard looks at why this exists and what we can do to go forward. So, with that, you know, as a mother, I have 2 daughters, and I have 2 granddaughters. And I am very, very hopeful, perhaps not in my generation, but hopefully for my daughters and certainly for my granddaughters, that we will begin to see these numbers change dramatically. And I am very hopeful that at some point in time, there will be liberty and justice for her, so that there can be liberty and justice for all. Thank you.